Hello everyone, I am the Schleg Daddy from the Wedge Busters, here to finish out my divisional preview series for the 2011 NFL season. Make sure you go to our channel and watch the other preview videos I've done if you haven't done so already. Without any further ado, let's finish this out, shall we? It's time to take a look at the worst division in football in 2010, the NFC West. At the start of the 2010 season, there were some positive signs for the Arizona Cardinals, and it looked like at one point in time they may very well contend for that division all year long. They started off the season 3-2, but then it seems like reality kind of set in for them, and they went on a very, very untimely 7-game losing streak that pretty much ended their season, which was a result of question after question at the quarterback position and all the upheaval and uncertainty they faced at that position all throughout 2010. They ended up on offense finishing 27th in points scored and 31st in total yards, including 32nd, butt naked last, as a rushing offense. So they struggled on offense. They also struggled on defense too. They finished 30th in points allowed and 29th in yards allowed. So as you can see, even if the season started off well for them, it quickly went south, and they ended up being a very, very bad football team, finishing 5-11. So not surprisingly, after the 5-11 season, the Cardinals went into the offseason wanting to make some big changes, and they did. They made a big trade to get Eagles backup quarterback Kevin Kolb, and also drafted cornerback Patrick Peterson from LSU with the 5th overall pick in this year's draft. There are questions aplenty for this Arizona Cardinals franchise just 3 short years after making an appearance in the Super Bowl. Is Kevin Kolb really an NFL starting quarterback and one that you can build a team around? Will former 2009 first-round pick Beanie Wells prove that he's not a bust at running back? And can the Cardinals defense really stop anybody? The player to watch for the Arizona Cardinals in 2011, beyond question, has to be Kevin Kolb. That franchise is looking for an answer. The days of Kurt Warner are gone. They need somebody new, because Matt Leinart and the cast of characters like Max Hall and John Skelton last year sure as hell didn't work out. So Kevin Kolb has the burden of big expectations, and now it's going to be interesting to see if he can start to live up to them in Arizona. As far as perspective for the Cardinals' chances and outlook in 2011, it really does come down to Kevin Kolb. If you're a Kevin Kolb fan, you think the Cardinals can finish 8-8, 9-7, and really have a chance to win that pretty weak NFC West. If you're like me and you're not sold on Kevin Kolb and don't think he's done enough to prove that he's a real NFL starting quarterback, then you're going to be like me and think that this team's going to finish around 6-10 and be bringing up the rear in the NFC West. The Seattle Seahawks, the worst team I've ever seen, make the divisional round of the playoffs. In 2010, boy oh boy, what to say about the Seahawks. They finished 7-9. But due to their victory in Week 17 against the St. Louis Rams, ended up winning the NFC West. They beat the Saints in the wild card round at home, which featured that oh-so-memorable run by Marshawn Lynch where he seemed to break like 300 frickin' tackles, all Walter Payton style, studly, before they lost to the Chicago Bears in the divisional playoff. When you look at the numbers of 2010, it's not surprising they were 7-9. It's just odd that they won the division. They ended up finishing 23rd on offense in points scored, 28th in total yards, including being 31st, that's second to last in the league in rushing yards. On defense, they were 25th in points allowed and 27th in yards allowed. So even though this is a team that won its division, even though this is a team that won a playoff game, they had a lot of holes in 2010, and their 7-9 record clearly reflects that. So obviously, head coach Pete Carroll and the Seahawks organization felt they had some major deficiencies, in particular on the offensive side of the football. They brought in free agents such as Pro Bowl tight end Zach Miller from the Oakland Raiders, wide receiver Sidney Rice from the Minnesota Vikings, former number 2 overall pick, offensive guard Robert Gallery, again from the Raiders, and brought in Tavares Jackson from the Minnesota Vikings to be their new starting quarterback. Ooh. So the questions for the Seahawks in 2011 include who will finish the season as quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks? Will it be Tavares Jackson or will it be Charlie Whitehurst? Can Marshawn Lynch and Justin Forsett provide a more potent rushing attack for that offense in 2011? Because that is a trademark of Pete Carroll coach teams, whether it be in college at USC or in the NFL before. He likes to run the football. And in order for the Seahawks to be successful, they're going to have to do a better job than they did last year. And on defense, they didn't make a lot of changes. So the most important thing for them is for former number 4 overall pick outside linebacker Aaron Curry and last year's 14th overall pick free safety Earl Thomas. Those guys are going to have to go from just being very good players to being among the very best at their position in the NFL and really be standout stars for that Seahawks defense to improve in 2011. The early stretch of the season in 2011 will give you an indicator of what the Seahawks can do this year. Their first 5 games, they have 3 road games out of those first 5 and a couple of really tough opponents in there as well. They go on the road to San Francisco, on the road to Pittsburgh. They have Arizona at home. Then they have Atlanta at home before going to the new Meadowlands to play the Giants. The Seahawks, if they have any shot of contending in the NFC West, as bad as it might be, have to go no worse than 2-3 in that first 5-game stretch in order to have any shot to be there at the end of the year. There's still offensive questions abound, even with some of the acquisitions they've made. And you look at wide receiver, bringing in Sidney Rice. This is a team that's traded a first-round pick in the past for Deion Branch, spent big money on it, Nate Burleson and a TJ Hushmanzada. None of those ever really panned out. So I'm not sure where the Seahawks think that Sidney Rice is going to be any different for them this time. And on defense, there were a lot of holes, but Pete Carroll, I guess, believes that another year of continuity in that lineup with 1 or 2 small changes is going to make all the difference. And I'm just not really buying them this year. Yeah, they won the division at 7-9, but I still think they're a 7-9 team. And this year, I think it's only going to be good enough for 3rd place in the NFC West. A breakdown of the numbers in 2010 show that the San Francisco 49ers struggled mightily on offense, in particular in the passing game. They finished 24th in points scored and 24th in total offensive yardage. On defense, it was a tale of 2 sides. They finished 6th against the run and 24th against the pass. But the 49ers went into 2010 with a lot of expectations. And for a team with a lot of buzz around it, an 0-5 start pretty much derailed the season before it ever really had a chance. They had issues at quarterback throughout the year, and Mike Singletary ended up getting the boot. So the biggest made change by the 49ers organization in the offseason was going into the college ranks and plucking away former NFL quarterback and Stanford head coach Jim Harbaugh to be the new man at the helm of this 49ers organization. So some of the questions facing the 49ers in 2011, first and foremost to me, what has Alex Smith done in his 6 seasons in the league to justify getting another shot as the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers? It's one thing that he was once the number 1 overall pick in 2005, but he's had 6 seasons. It hasn't worked. It's time to move on. Will Frank Gore ever play a 16-game season? Will the drafting of Aldon Smith, outside linebacker from Missouri, 7th overall, improve the Niners' pass rush and help them better stop opponents' passing games? The 49ers the past 2 seasons have been a very disappointing team. They've had a certain level of expectations in both in 2009 and 2010, really kicked the bucket and failed to live up to them at all. Jim Harbaugh is the latest coach to make the jump from the NCAA level to the NFL level, but I do think he was the right guy for the job. But there are things he's going to have to work on. Alex Smith, to me, has shown nothing really in his 6 seasons to justify giving him another chance at starting quarterback, and I don't expect him to be the starter that long in 2011. On top of that, on the offensive side of the ball, their offensive line features 4 guys that were either first or second round picks: Joe Staley, Ayupati, Anthony Davis, and Chilo Rochelle. At some point, this line is going to have to show itself to be one of the very best in the NFL, especially with the number of high draft picks that organization has invested in the O-line. Otherwise, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board with the offensive line. The defense itself, to me, also hasn't really lived up to the expectations. And it's a shame, too, because any defense with a Patrick Willis at the controls, you would think would be better than this one really has been. Maybe I'm taking a bit of a flyer here, but I expect the 49ers to finish 8-8 and in second place in the NFC West. Call me crazy, but that's what I think. So that means the winners of the NFC West will be the Rams in 2010, in my opinion, really were the best of the worst in the NFC West. But unfortunately for them, they failed to seal the deal in that Week 17 game against Seattle. They ended up finishing 7-9 in second place in the NFC West and out of the playoffs. On offense, they were 26 in points scored and total yards. And their defense was kind of the middle of the road. Not great, but not terrible at the same time. The biggest story for them was number 1 overall pick, Sam Bradford, really coming in and establishing himself as a legit NFL starting quarterback. The Rams went into the offseason looking for weapons, both on offense and on defense. In the draft, they took defensive end Robert Quinn from North Carolina. It'll be interesting to see how he does, having sat out all of 2010. But another weapon for Spagnuolo's pass rush on the defense. And on offense, their biggest acquisition was of former Jacksonville Jaguar wide receiver Mike Sims Walker. There are really 2 big questions facing the Rams in 2011. Will Sam Bradford and the offense as a whole grow better in 2011? And on the defensive side of the ball, can Steve Spagnuolo get this defense to go from being a middle-of-the-road unit to being one that could be a top 10 defense this year? Your players to watch for the Rams on offense will be wide receiver Danny Amendola. Offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels is going to look to use Amendola in a Wes Welker type of role. So especially for you fantasy players, there's a potential for Amendola in that slot role to get a lot of looks and opportunities from quarterback Sam Bradford. And on defense, it's going to have to be Robert Quinn. If he can come in and not show signs of a lot of rust from the year layoff and be a pass rush force on the outside opposite Chris Long, this defensive unit could really make some strides in 2011. It's a pity that the Rams didn't win the division last year because they really were, honestly, the best team in the NFC West, even though that's not saying much. I expect that to change this year. Not only do I think they will be the best team in the NFC West, I think they'll show it by winning it with a record of, let's say, around 9-7. Bradford is going to grow, and that offense is going to get a little bit better, but they're not going to be an elite unit yet because they're still lacking weapons for him to play with. And on defense, the addition of a guy like a Robert Quinn at defensive end is going to help. So the defense will make some strides, but they're not going to exactly be an elite unit just yet. So 9-7, first place in the NFC West. It's a good team. They're making some improvements, but it's definitely not a Super Bowl contender just yet. Make sure to let me know what you think of the NFC West down below in the comments section. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe up above. Coming up every week here at the Wedge Busters, you'll see throughout the week, you'll see the Week in Review, where we take a look at the previous week's games. We'll give you a fantasy football sit and start kind of show. We'll also give you our weekly picks and predictions for the NFL season all throughout, and maybe do some special segments and videos throughout the course of the season. Coming up this weekend, I know I'll put out my playoff and Super Bowl picks on this channel, so stay tuned. I am the Schleg Daddy, one half of the Wedge Busters! And thank God there's football in 2011.